Hopefully all of you have had a chance to spend some time with the agenda items that were attached to the website. So we have all the regular things we normally get on the website with the agenda, and then there are two different packets that were also attached. One that has the minutes from our last meeting and a couple of the items from the agenda, and the other one has the components regarding the historical overlay materials. So those are what were in the two packets. Regarding our agenda for today, we have review of our minutes, and then we have the two different properties on Commercial Street with the 157 Commercial Street historical overlay signage review. And then I was wondering if we want to take these in this order or handle both of those at the same time, or how did you want that? Or how did you expect that to be moving forward? Teresa, I don't know if the applicant had an expectation there. But then we have the final review for Pheasant Run, where we will make a recommendation to the city council based on that final review. And then the last piece is the historical overlay for the facade of 145 North Commercial Street. So that's our job for today. Any questions regarding the agenda before we jump into these specific items for discussion? Well, maybe just a couple of things housekeeping wise. Hopefully everybody can hear me and see me. I think I see pretty much everybody else. With respect to how the meeting operates, obviously it's very different today. So thank you for accommodating the circumstances of our times. A couple of things that might be helpful just from a housekeeping perspective. If you're in a quiet environment, you can probably stay off mute if you want, but oftentimes it's better just to stay muted unless you're ready to speak. If you have something that you want to say and you're not able to break in, if you click on the participant list, there will be a pop-up that shows all the participants and you can raise your hand. You can click the raise hand button, and that should hopefully alert one of us that there's a pending comment and we can acknowledge and give you the floor. So we'll try to do that. Hopefully everyone's getting not just video but audio. I'm going to assume that's the case. Otherwise, if you can kind of notify us one way or another, that would be great. I didn't hear any comments regarding the agenda. So let's just jump into our minutes for last meeting, which was March, I guess it was March 17th. So everyone had a chance to review those, and any commentary prior to going into our official agenda items.
Nate, I was just going to let you know somebody joined G5 is the description there, so I'm not sure who that is. You might want to acknowledge him.
Looks like G5 is Mr. Garside.
I thought he was GQ.
Well, he's both. But he is on mute. We can't hear you, Steve.
There we go. Sorry.
Now we can hear you.
I was just saying that you guys, yeah, aren't even old enough to know what GQ means. So.
All right. So our minutes from March 17th. What revisions or corrections or comments do you have related to the minutes?
I don't know that I noticed anything that seemed out of order with them.
Okay, thank you, Lance, appreciate that. We'll assume that's the case across the board. If you had something, I'm sure you would have spoken up by now. When I read through them, which was hoping to read through them a second time with my pen, but when I read through them the first time, I didn't notice anything wrong as far as the content. Item number 1, historical overlay, which is the signage. So this is the, let me pull up the other file here with Mr. Wycliffe that last month had come in and shared some information that he had. He was trying to get some approval regarding the Buzzies signage, and it wasn't specifically on the agenda for that property. So we acknowledged that that was his interest and it was put on this agenda. So that's our conversation for today.
Chair,
Yes.
the first item is actually signage for the First Bank building by John Patterson.
Oh, is that the one?
Yes, and Mr. Patterson is on with us.
Okay, let me get my little file here situated. I've got the wrong one open.
His submittal would be on the first packet.
Yep, I've got that up now. I just had to switch my screen over. Thank you. And sorry about that, Mr. Patterson. Would you like to give us an overview of your project?
Excuse me. I've been working on rehabilitating the old First National Bank building. In doing so, I reached out to the current manager at the bank, and they gave me just confirmed that I could use, First National Bank. It's a name that's gone and they no longer use, and they were okay with it going back onto the bank the way it, the old building, the way it was originally. The sign that's in the plans that you have, one of the things we wanted to do was get a clock back on that building. From the 1930s up until the First National Bank left, there was a backlit clock on that, on the signage. The original sign simply just said bank on it. A couple photographs from two different eras pretty much show that that's what was there. Since the address was more important than the word bank, we just simply went with the 157 on the sign. Part of the sign was also to tie it into the sign that used to be on the old Stewart's restaurant. If you have the document I sent you, it has a profile looking back up the street where you'll see Buzzies and the Country Cafe. The Country Cafe sign actually used to be where the Buzzies sign is now. So part of the design too was to complement the Country Cafe sign. It's a neon, originally was a neon lit sign, and is really the last original sign from an early era left on Commercial Street. And part of the design on the sign was also keeping in tune to the Art Deco facade that was put on that bank in 1936.
Based on the illustration that we see from Allied Electric sign, there's something right above the word national, and I can't tell if that protrudes out or what that is. Is that a light, or can you help me understand what that is?
Um,
A little red,
It's the clock.
that's the clock. Okay.
That's the
got
clock, yeah.
If you scroll down, and then you can see a side view, and that shows how it sticks out. Looks pretty good, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Patterson. If there's anything else to jump in with, please don't hesitate. So the question, is whether or not to move forward with this as outlined. Now, based on what staff had included in their notes, in general, the internally lit signs or illuminated signs are not part of what would qualify. However, we have jurisdiction to make the kind of approval if that's what we recommend. And Mr. Patterson's talking about how that fits in with the era and the decor, even though it is internally illuminated. And so the recommendation initially was that this would be something to continue to pursue and promote and approve. So that's kind of the backdrop. What points of discussion for members of the commission based on your reading of the notes, your familiarization with the property and the historical overlay district? What other points of discussion do you have with respect to this project?
Mr. Patterson, you can't tell because it's daytime and it's a concept, but what would be lit? What would we see? The numbers and the clock face, or what would actually be lit at night?
If you go to page 2 of 3 on the design, in the upper right corner is a nighttime simulation that would have the 157 and the clock lit. I acknowledge that
thank you.
So the words First National Bank are not lit then,
No,
but just the clock and the numbers on the 157.
that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one thing I'd like to maybe make note of, and I hope I'm not missing something, on our package, it's showing 175 commercial and or the signage is showing 157. I mean, probably not a huge deal. It's just that we got a difference in the packet to the drawings and signs that we have here.
If I could, the building address is 157.
Okay, so it was probably just a typo. It's showing 175 North Commercial Street on the stuff we were given. So probably just a typo. So we'll just, if we do a motion, we'll want to make sure we get the address right on that.
And it's possible that could have been a carryover from one of the other agenda items for Pheasant Run. The address for Pheasant Run is 175 North, 525 West. So maybe that was just a carry forward.
Nate, I'd like to add a piece to what we're talking about.
Sure.
John, with the prominence of the, there's some feedback. Is that me? Huh, boy, when I talk, I hear feedback. With the prominence of the First National Bank there, I think there's going to be some concern, and let me just a little bit of background. I'm speaking for maybe spending a career in the finance and banking arena. There's going to be regulators that will have concern, and when I say regulators, either a state or a federal, that'll have concern over confusion with the prominence of the First National Bank. It's promoting. There could be some confusion that it's promoting the bank and not the building. And I'd almost suggest that you maybe want to check with them before moving ahead, because you go to all the effort, put all that effort into it, and they may make you take that down.
Checking with who?
State of Utah, it's the Department of Financial Institutions. On the federal side, it's an arm of the U.S. Treasury. It's called the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency.
I'm also willing just to, instead of having bank, because I've thought about that as well, just putting BLDG, First National Building.
You'd probably be okay. Leave the word.
Building is, would be probably a little more neutral.
Bingo. Yeah, I think that would diffuse it.
Yeah, I had a similar thought as you were talking about that. And even if you left bank on but added the word building, you're making it clear that it's the First National Bank building. Just like you refer to the Wells Fargo building in Salt Lake, even though it's not Wells Fargo, you know what building that is. You're referring to a piece of real estate.
I'd even be a little bit careful with having national and bank. The Treasury's pretty sensitive. If you're a state chartered bank, you can't use the word national in your name at all. So you'd probably be hearing from them. But I think it diffuses it nicely to just call it a building. That's all I had.
Thank you. Anything else with respect to the signage request and how it fits in with the historical overlay district in which it resides?
Mr. Chairman, I have something.
Okay.
I was looking at this, and to be honest with you, was impressed with the way this was presented. And I know I've been kind of harping on some of the things that's come to us that it doesn't really make a lot of sense or doesn't give us a lot of idea what the final product is. But moving forward, I would think that this would kind of be maybe one of the standards that we would like to, for me personally, would like to see on this overlay, to see what the building looks like, a professional looking rendering of the front of the building. I think for me, it makes it a lot easier. I think this looks terrific for a concept.
Definitely helps us visualize it. As far as making that a standard is, I don't know that that's necessarily written into ordinance that they have to go to that much rendering and effort, but I think it's a good example that maybe when applicants come in can be shared potentially. I don't know how that works when the city staff is having people come in, but here's something that really helps visualize and make decisions on what it can look like.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is it can't hold their feet to the fire or anything, but at least this is an example of, we can say, hey, can you bring us a rendering that gives us a little bit better idea of what the final product is going to look like. And I don't think that's much to ask.
Yeah, I like that, Wes. If we may, I'd like to stop this part of the conversation here. I think we've got a lot of the input that we were looking for, and we'll revisit this in the full session. We've got 10 minutes. I'd like to move to the final review of Pheasant Run at this point, which is the subdivision off of Island Road. Unless I've got that one wrong too. But this is the one that's adjacent to Wasatch Shadows. They're ready to move ahead with final, which means our role is to determine whether or not to make that recommendation to the city council. And hopefully everyone's had a chance to look through all the engineering notes, the status that they're in, as well as the staff notes on top of that. So let me just open it up there regarding this particular project, because this one's come before us several times. Now that it's at final, this is when the city council finally sees it. And I want to make sure regardless of what direction we vote on this, that it's buttoned up and ready for the next step.
Nate, are we relying on the developer on item 50 where it says documents will be needed to record the access? It seems like this is kind of like the sticking point on this thing. Is there anything that they've decided to do an agreement on that access road?
That Weston, do you know if there's a stipulation that's been communicated? I don't know what's been shared with the applicant.
Yeah, there is an agreement, and there's easements in place for access and for maintenance for that 20-foot access easement.
It's also on the city council agenda for the next meeting, so it would be with the recommendation. That document would be reviewed by the city council.
Is it limited to the 20 feet?
Steve, can you say that again?
I was just wondering if it's limited to the 20 feet, or are we getting some type of a reservation for the eventual full width of the roadway?
So it has a 60-foot easement, and we're just maintaining the 20 feet access at this point.
Okay. I was concerned. I want to make sure that we had the full width. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
One
Go
question
ahead.
about that, the document for that emergency access. I know at one time someone had mentioned about people using it just as they're walking and going out for a walk. And this will be, I'm assuming, signed as this is an emergency access only, gated and kind of try and make it obvious that this isn't your walking path shortcut over to 300 West, because this isn't at this time a public easement or access right. All it is an emergency access, correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding of it. Steve?
Well, if it's an easement to the city, then it would be in the public, but it is going to be a fire access easement. I think it should, a fire access road. And so I don't know that we could keep pedestrian traffic off of it.
So they may just be climbing the fence, but the property owner understands then that this, it may get some public foot traffic, and there's probably nothing we can do about it then. Okay.
Yeah. When you say climbing the fence, I knew it was going to be gated. Is there going to be some
Well,
type of fence?
I guess I would have assumed that the fence, and I'd have to pull the plans up, that where it's agricultural property all surrounding, I would have assumed that fence would go, right to that gate. I got the plans here. I can try and find it and look.
And that's a question I have, Lance, while you're pulling up plans. Was that, I have my plans before this final plat. Teresa, where would I find those online for the final plat that they're proposing?
I don't believe I attached it online, as it's pretty much the same as far as the plat of the last submittal. The only change we really had was redesign of part of the excuse me if I'm wrong, Lance, I believe it was the storm drain system.
Correct. That's actually why I have this current, most updated set of plans. I called Matt today. I wanted to check on a bypass line that was still shown, and he did send me the most current plans. And I believe that is all that was changed, was some stuff to do with the storm drain and adding a sump and getting rid of a bypass line.
Okay. It feels like other than that final sign off, which happens, it's already part of the city council agenda. All the open items have been either completed or addressed appropriately. And it's a matter of determining, all right, where we go from here. And want some thoughts on that. But one question that I had, Teresa, that I'd requested based on some confusion we experienced a couple months ago, was to potentially just revisit this emergency access language in our ordinances, particularly, where you have to have 2 points of access. One of those we found out later it can be an emergency access, but this is for any subdivision with more than whatever it was, 20 units. And once we found it didn't have to be a full-on street, but just emergency access, the thinking that I had was, well, should it be that way? Should we explore that? Is that even something that we want to change? And if the answer is no, then we're good as is. If the answer is yes, then we might want to explore what that language would look like. So I don't know how to capture that. If you want to put that down for a future agenda item that we can discuss, then and make that decision on where to go, that'd be helpful.
It looks like Weston had been working on that as part of a discussion that we put on hold. So it's up to you if you want to add that for next month's meeting. We surely can.
I'd like to have the conversation. I think the sooner we decide if it's either appropriate or if it needs to be adjusted, then the more projects will be subject to it, as opposed to coming in and maybe turning into a project that isn't in line with the vision of the city. So I think it's worth doing sooner rather than later.
Okay.
So yes,
and then we'll go ahead then and add that to next month's meeting. And Weston's got that actually, I believe, prepared already.
Okay. And we have 1 minute until we officially start. So let's pause there. And just as a reminder to everybody, of course, we're all on video. This is being recorded. It's also a live stream for the whole world to enjoy, since they have nothing better to do than watch us. And we'll kick off here in about 30 seconds. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nathan McClellan, and I want to welcome you all to this virtual Planning Commission of April 21st, 2020. It is 7 o'clock and we're ready to kick off. So welcome all. One housekeeping item, obviously we're all online. This is being streamed across YouTube Live for viewing. Also, for those that are in the meeting room itself, if you can, when it's time to share something, if you're not acknowledged and we're not noticing that, if you could use the controls in the meeting room to raise your hand so that we can acknowledge that you're ready to contribute something. As far as taking attendance, Teresa, I'm making the assumption that you will use the participant list to do that. But if you need people to type anything into the group chat, just give us the instructions that you'd like to move forward with so you have what you need for recording.
It looks like we can just take who is in this meeting.
Perfect. Well, we'll do that. All right, moving on to the agenda items. First, before we touch on our 3 items on tonight's agenda, we met on March 17th last, and we have the minutes from that meeting that we've had an opportunity to review and make those officially part of the record. So at this point, I want to open it up to members of the commission who've had a chance to review those minutes for accuracy or any revisions to please comment on that now, and then we can move forward.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of the March 17th Planning Commission meeting as is.
Thank you, Lance. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Wes has seconded the motion. Any discussion? Then let's vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, can you please indicate, I guess, so we can see on the video. All right, I think that was 5. So me, Wes, Jim, Lance, and Jay. Does that look right? Okay, thank you. The 3 items on our agenda are, and we'll take them in this order. The first is in reference to some signage on Commercial Street within the historical overlay zone. And we will we'll begin with that agenda item, move into the request to for final approval on the plat for Pheasant Run subdivision, at which point we'll make a recommendation to the city council based on that application. And then we'll finish up with another historical overlay zone review, also on Commercial Street, this one at 145 North. So we'll go in that order. We'll start off with the signage on 157 Commercial Street. The applicant, Mr. John Patterson, is with us in this meeting, and he has supplied a number of renderings to help us visualize what he envisions with this project. And Mr. Patterson, would you mind just giving us an overview of what you're doing there and what your vision is?
Yeah, we've been remodeling and refurbishing the old First National Bank building into professional office space. In looking at historical photographs spanning from about probably from the 1930s until the bank left that building in 1973, it displayed a blade sign with a clock on it. And the signage that we're proposing is getting a clock back on the building, since that was kind of a prominent feature of the signs that were on there for so long. The request that we made with the sign was that it reflect the Art Deco facade that was put on the building in, I think it was about 1936, as well as to complement the Old Country Cafe sign that will be, I think the intent of that owner is to have it rebuilt and relit, since it's an old neon sign and is actually the last sign from a bygone era on Commercial Street. The blade signs on the building just said bank. Rather than putting bank on, we just opted to put the address of the building, which is 157, just kind of keep it simple. The old mechanical clock that operated the previous sign that was backlit is still in the building, and there's still conduit through the facade that provided power to the original signs. I'll address the one issue that came up in the loop as a formal part of the meeting, that we are okay to call it the First National Building and changing the BANK to BLDG abbreviation for building, so we don't run afoul of any other regulatory issues.
All right, thank you for that overview. One question that I have, just based on a note that I'd read, part of the project, and one of the reasons it's before us, besides being in the zone, is there's a question regarding internal illumination, and the clock and the street number, the 157, will both be illuminated internally, and you've outlined why that's appropriate. But in the application, it also indicates that a different lighting source, such as gooseneck lighting, wouldn't fit with the historic nature of the building. And my question is, we have some of that gooseneck lighting on other properties adjacent to, not immediately adjacent, but in the same street that this building is. Is it that your comment is related to it doesn't fit with the First National Bank building in particular, or it doesn't fit with the era of the historical overlay on any of the buildings?
There's some old photographs from the 1800s, late 1800s, that show the flat signs. Of course, with that period, none of them were illuminated even externally. The bank building, aside from probably Dev's Spicy Pie, the hotel, and the physical therapy building, the old LNR building, are the only buildings that really still have an original facade on them. The Vallis Hotel's facade has been redone several times over the years, but in terms of the facade that's on the bank building, it's really been unaltered since the 1930s. And that building never had any lighting mounted on it. As you review the pictures going back through the decades.
All right, thank you. Regarding this project and the proposal of what Mr. Patterson wants to do with the signage on 157 Commercial Street, those among us on the commission, what other questions do you have for Mr. Patterson regarding the project, or kind of the exception to authorize internally lit signage in this particular zone, which we can do if it feels appropriate to this body?
Mr. Chair, one thing I do like about this is I read the specifications of it. I mean, I can see where down the road, if someone comes with their molded plastic sign that they want to, that has the lights inside and stick on the front, I can see where we might want to reconsider something like this. But I think this looks like a good quality product, aluminum frame and aluminum. It's not just like an old molded plastic sign that the whole thing lights up inside. And I think when I look at that building, I really do feel like it fits and looks like what should be there. My thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of evaluating this on a case-by-case basis, and in this case where we have good renderings to help visualize the nature of the product and does it actually fit? In this case, I think we can make that kind of determination. And as long as we have equally high quality renderings for other applicants, hopefully we can make just as qualified decisions in those cases too. Thanks, Lance. Other discussion points on this project?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I look at the paint schedule on page 2 of 3. It says paint 1 is to be determined. And I was wondering if Mr. Patterson could clarify if it's actually going to be the red that we see in the concept, or what's going on there. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The paint is the red that you're seeing, because part of it was to complement the old Country Cafe sign that was originally where the Buzzy's Grill sign currently is.
Okay, yeah, I just saw here on the paint scheme, it says to be determined, and I thought, I didn't know if you had to figure out the actual shade of red or what was going on there. But anyway, I was just curious about that.
Oh, yeah, no, it's red.
And is the intent to match that as close as possible to the same red on the Country Cafe Buzzy's signage, or just red kind of?
It was just kind of the red. I think the Country Cafe sign might be rebuilt and relit with the neon. The cafe part of it still has the neon on it. But again, it was just kind of to complement it, not necessarily an exact match. And even that sign probably won't be the same color red, given the age of the paint that's on it now and the need to rework it.
Thank you. What other discussion items regarding this sign?
Mr. Chair, if I could just address the first question that you had asked about the historical aspect, whether it's from the 30s or from before that, if I might.
Please.
So Mr. Patterson is correct. If you look at the old photos, they were just the flat wooden signs, and there was not lighting back then on that. So when they put the historical ordinance together, and Teresa can correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's just kind of a compromise. Obviously, we want people to be able to light their signs, but we wanted to try to do it in a way that didn't detract from that era. Here you've got a situation where the historical era that they're looking at is when the building was redone in the 30s, and obviously the focus of the historical ordinance goes beyond that period. But I don't think that that you're compromising the objective or purpose of that ordinance by saying, okay, this is the era that we want to reflect, at least with this building. And so even though the ordinance overall does not favor the internally lit one, where you've got one that does reflect an era when the building was more viable, again, I don't think that you're violating the intent of the ordinance by allowing this to go forward. I just wanted the commission to understand the reason for that prohibition is that when the ordinance was first put together, they were looking obviously at an era before the 1930s.
That's a great clarification. I actually had wondered which part of history we were trying to preserve, the 1930s, the 1880s. So that is helpful.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a comment on this type of sign. It really upgrades the look of the business inside. Where my business is, we have a bunch of different types of signs, and this signage, it's looks great, and it can be as flashy as you want, as subtle as you want it to be, and this looks like it's just a real classy, subtle look that will kind of upgrade that whole area, in my opinion. It's just, this type of signage is I think important for down there on Commercial Street to keep for what we're trying to accomplish down there.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. What other thoughts or questions come to mind with respect to this before taking action?
Well, if I can just add one more thing, as I'm looking at the picture that shows the Buzzies and the Country Cafe on page 3 of 3. It's an interesting thing. You've got two older looking buildings. Well, three, if you count like down by, the liquor store, you kind of got three older looking buildings. And as we move on with some of this stuff, if they were wanting to put this exact sign on front of the Country Cafe with the old weathered boards and leave it that look, I would probably say this sign might not fit. But with the brick and that look, I think this sign just matches perfectly.
Thank you. And I don't notice any hands raised in the meeting room. Any other comments from those that are participating today? Well, at this point, it may be appropriate then to call for a motion. The one thing just to throw out there, and I don't know if it makes any difference at all, but depending on the final decisioning on First National BLDG or whatever you put on there, that doesn't materially change any of the, if it's that, or you spell out the whole word or anything like that, it doesn't change the actual design. So I just want to make sure that, Mr. Patterson, as you move forward and maybe you get clearance from the regulators and you decide to go a different direction with what word you put there, that would still fall within, this action, either approve or not approve. But I just want to make sure that's at least explicitly called out. Okay, well, let's take some action on this. Who'd like to frame a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the historical design review of 157 North Commercial Street for signage as proposed, with possible exception being given to wording changes on the First National Bank portion of the proposal, from a bank to building or something to that effect.
Thank you, Lance, for that motion. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second it. And I also have a friendly amendment.
All right, Jim, let's go ahead and discuss the motion and you can add your amendment.
I just think we need to clarify, because the concept is there, since we are being technical, that the first color of paint would be red.
All right, Lance, would you accept that friendly amendment? Okay. The motion on the table is to approve the proposed signage as outlined in the motion, and the amendment would be to add the color red. Any other discussion on this motion? Then let's go ahead and vote. We can keep our hands up in the air or press the raise hand button, I suppose. But why don't we just all in favor, hold it up till we can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's unanimous, Teresa. Thank you. Motion passes. Mr. Patterson, thank you. Moving to the second item on the agenda. This is in regards to the Pheasant Run subdivision, which is located adjacent to Wasatch Shadows. This is located at approximately 175 North, 525 West. And the request before us today is to review the final plat and provide a recommendation to the city council on whether or not to move forward with that final plat. Do we have a member of representing the developer here tonight? I didn't think I saw anyone in the room. It doesn't mean they're not dialed in, but. All right, so we'll discuss this without representation from the developer. The project essentially has had come before us several times, most recently in February. And at the time, one of the outstanding issues was related to the emergency access and having that represented in the plat and finalizing all of the remaining engineering notes and open items. Those have been addressed and commented on as a commission. We've had an opportunity to review those. And at this point, let's open it up for any other discussion we have with respect to this particular project and prior to making a recommendation to the city council. So the time is open for the commission.
If I may just say, I feel like it's been a long road to get here, and I hope that they're at least watching. I'm a little disappointed that someone with the project isn't in the meeting with us.
Yeah, I always appreciate when we can get that perspective directly, in the room. Now, under these circumstances, it's hard to know if they're watching and just not able to contribute. But
Mr. Chair, I got a question.
yeah,
The last meeting I was at, when we brought this up, the developer kind of seemed a little bit shocked and taken back that he wasn't aware, and he was going to talk to Weston, I think, and kind of get this thing all ironed out, because this was the sticking point. And so I guess my question is, has the developer really got this access thing buttoned up with the city and all the parties that need to check off on this thing?
Weston, can I turn that question over to you?
Yeah. Yes. So part of that came from me being new. Part of that came from clarifying a lot of discussions that previously had happened. And they do have everything in place now. They've got access easement agreements, temporary turnaround agreements. All that's in place. It'll be reviewed with the city council, and this is reviewed with the city council.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. It's one that has generated a number of discussions within the body of the commission, and something that we'll be discussing down the road with respect to second points of access for future projects and how we want to address that with respect to our codes.
Having seen the latest plat, what was decided on the west end? Is there going to be a cul-de-sac, or is that going to be a through street?
The notes indicate that it will be a cul-de-sac and not a through street. If you're talking about on that west end where it butts up against the Greens property, that will be a cul-de-sac. So if someone has better information, please correct me.
That's correct.
Because I know at one point there was a discussion of if they were going to do something together and tie in a Mr. Green's development there. So I didn't know what had been determined there. So thank you.
What other discussion items do we have? From my standpoint, I have some mixed thoughts here. One, it feels like, even though there's been points throughout this project where it felt like there was ill preparation, it feels like at this point that's been tied up and met the requirements of the zone. And so we're at the point where those things are closed out, and that's how the city council prefers us to pass things on to them, is with all these things tidied up and closed out. So that part feels like that's happened. It's been a long journey. I believe that, we started with either a zoning change or general plan change, I forget what it was, a long time ago, to allow for this this use and this project. And so everything's been done in accordance with that. And I guess part of my question is thinking there's still more adjacent properties. Just like this is an adjacent property to Wasatch Shadows, and it's able to tap into that infrastructure to provide access. Moving beyond this into, the next property owner, and finding that consistency with our general plan. I guess this is more of a comment. And, as we look at revisiting that general plan, one of the things that this project has sparked for me is how we buffer the density, having some of the variety of projects within the city limits. And in this particular one, there's not a lot of variety, which is why this is on my mind. Not a lot of variety with the configuration of the lots, and so that's something that I've been thinking about more, bigger than this project, which is pretty far down the path. But as we think about that general plan, it's something that I'm still very concerned about as a citizen, as a member, is not just trying to adhere to the existing ordinances, but maybe ensuring that our zones and general plan are in line with the vision of what we collectively want in the city. And maybe this is it, maybe not. But I think that's part of that discussion, that it's at least raised my awareness that there should be more conversation about it.
Nate?
Yes.
The only thing that really jumped out at me overall on this was just kind of the frontage. I think, from an aesthetic standpoint, when you're driving down a road and you see frontage with vast amount of space versus limited frontage, I think the neighborhoods have a different look and feel to them. And so the thing that jumped out to me the most during this process was the frontage in this development. I noticed that a lot of the lots were a little bit more narrow in general. And so that's going to cause more deeper lots closer together. So you're going to have a lot of those long, thin lots. And so I don't know that it necessarily means anything to me, but it's just a point that I'm sensing and I'm feeling, as far as 80-foot frontages are very different than 120-foot frontages and things like that. And so just a point that I noticed was the frontage on a lot of these lots are gonna, it's gonna have a certain look and feel to it based on that limited width.
Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts about the applicant's request to move this into final review with the city council? part of what I'm thinking about with the applicant, and just based on what you said, is there were a couple of times where a comment was made that, well, given the configuration of the lot, that's, we're limited with the options we have, and we have to move forward with this type of design. And I've struggled with that ever since I've heard it. Not because it's not necessarily true. It's just not my problem. You bought the lot. You didn't have to develop that particular parcel if you didn't like the configuration. And I want to make sure that we keep ownership where ownership belongs. If there's configurations and designs, look, no one made you develop this parcel. And the fact that you are, there's some great benefits for the city, and that's your legal right to by all means pursue that. But not my fault if the lot that doesn't comply with all the kinds of different configurations. So that was something that stood out to me. I just want to be cautious moving forward, that don't fall into a trap of, well, that's the only thing you can do with this piece of land is make these types of lots. So that's a choice that you're making, and there's different choices you can make. All right, well, I don't have any other discussion myself. Jim, I saw you wiggle a finger. Is that?
Yeah, please. To both of your points, so how, does the ordinance allow us, or I don't know, I kind of get the sense we're having a patchwork community, if you will, a little bit here, a little bit there. It's not going to have the same feel to it as Jay's mentioned and you've mentioned. So, but I don't know. I mean, it complies with the ordinance, and so do we need to adjust ordinances or what? How do we go forward to try to get the same feel?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, I guess. In conjunction with the adjacent zoning, first of all, but what that zoning sits within in regards to the general plan behind it. And Ty, I don't know if you can give us an update of maybe what's happening behind the scenes with respect to the general plan.
Yeah, so we were awarded a grant for the general plan, so it's on our next agenda item to ratify. I signed the document to accept the award, and so we'll ratify my signature at the next city council meeting. So we're going to move forward. The next steps is to do an RFP, and we'll get moving right away on the general plan update. So that's a good opportunity to have all of these type of discussions. It won't necessarily change our ordinances. It'll just change the direction from the general plan, but that's the starting point, is identifying what kind of a community, what look and feel, what areas call for, or which type of zoning. So it'll be important to participate and have community members in the planning commission as part of that process. Just to clarify, for this parcel, the limiting factor wasn't the zoning, it was the sewer line that runs through it on an angle. And so it is unique compared to other properties, because one of those roads had to go over the top of the sewer line. So it wasn't just the shape of the parcel, but that determined the road layout. And that main intersection in the middle, the intersection has to come at 90-degree angles. And so that's why there's an S-curve through the middle. And the applicant also, in the beginning, when the comments were made about lot not having long, narrow lots, the frontage is the same as everywhere else as far as the requirements, but they came back with cul-de-sacs, which the city also discouraged. So we could have had more lots. They would have had the same frontage, but they wouldn't have been as deep. And because we didn't like the idea of having cul-de-sacs every, we deal with a cul-de-sac here and there, but this had like 3 cul-de-sacs in a row, which make everything else that we do as a city more difficult, including parking and snow removal and that sort of thing. So I think we did work really well with this applicant to get the best look and feel that we could with just those two limiting factors. It wasn't a matter that the developer didn't try, and it's not like we're stuck with anything. I think it'll turn out fine. I just wanted to make those comments on those limiting factors that they had to work around, and then also like that secondary access point. And it is going to be piecemeal as we move forward, because the next parcel to develop isn't always contiguous or whatever the next idea. So, you know, we kept the same zone that it butts up next to. It's the exact same zone requirements, and that's what we're left with. So I don't want to, it's not my place, but I don't want to say, hey, we're giving final approval, but we don't like anything about the subdivision, because we did have a lot of influence and those limiting factors that played into it. So.
Yeah, no, that's great clarification, and I appreciate that. It's an important point. It has come a long ways from some of those initial perspectives. Two things. One, you know, given that piecemeal kind of nature of things, which is hard to work around or avoid. You know, one of the best things I think is alignment with the vision of the city as represented in the general plan. And you'd outlined, you know, the grant money that's now available for us to help with that. Do you have a rough ballpark of a timeline of, you know, when that kicks off to when you expect it to wrap up?
Yeah, it'll be a year time frame, so hopefully it doesn't take that long, but we'll get the RFP out probably June, July, and make it part of next budget year's cycle, so starting in July till next June.
Okay.
It's a joint effort with the county, so part of this project is to update the county's general plan at the same time and look at the interface where the city boundaries end and we interface with the county as well. So it's a little larger than just the city plan as far as scope, but we will end up with just our own general plan revision. So another point while I'm talking, we also got a different grant through working with the Historic Society to rewrite our historic overlay zone with the help of the state and the Historic Society to make it more user friendly and more of a promotion tool than a regulatory tool. So it gets people excited about qualifying for grant money or getting a historic designation on their building for tax benefits and other things like that. And so that's an effort we'll be doing kind of at the same time as trying to rewrite the historic overlay zone. So that'll be good.
Yeah, no, that sounds very positive. I appreciate that. With respect to the configuration, one of the points that I want to clarify there, it's not so much that there hasn't been some wiggle room and the developer hasn't, you know, made some progress based on recommendations. It's that those aren't the only options, right? We're still talking minimum frontage and maximum density. And depending on the nature and usage of the project, if you're selling off the lots to individual buyers, that's one way to monetize your project. Another would be you're building spec homes on the project and selling those off yourself. And those have different economics. If you're just doing the street improvements and building out the improved lots to sell off to buyers, the point that I was trying to make, and I'd recommended to the developer early on, was what's the difference between selling one lot for $100,000 that's 80 foot frontage, or combining a lot here and there to give a little more variety and selling that lot out for $200,000. It's actually less piping and infrastructure needed, so it's cheaper to develop, and then you get some variety in the subdivision, just depending on the economics of what they're trying to do with it. that was never clarified for me, but there's more options than just maximizing the density and still being able to make it an economically viable project. All right, so we know what's before us is to make a recommendation to City Council. What other discussion points with this project and the open items, the journey they've been on, their readiness to move forward, and do we feel comfortable making a recommendation to the City Council based on what's been presented to us? Just checking for raised hands in our meeting room. Someone's going to push that button and I won't notice. We'll give another 20 seconds to ponder if there's any other discussion items.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I recommend that the Planning Commission give a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the final plat for the Pheasant Run subdivision?
All right, Jay has framed a motion for us. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Lance. Before voting, any discussion on this motion? Again, as we vote, just keep your hands up so we can see positive or negative. Call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the motion as outlined by Jay, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5 hands, Teresa. That's unanimous. We have passed on a positive recommendation for the City Council to approve the final plat of the Pheasant Run subdivision. That moves us to our final agenda item, which is, again, another historical overlay review for a project on 145 North Commercial Street. And as we prepare to jump into that, I just want to open it up and ask if there's any representation from that applicant with us in this meeting today. All right, I'm not seeing any noise or movement, so I'm going to say no on that. This particular project is part of the second packet that we'd received. So for those of you that are online and looking at the materials, this is in reference to, well, let me scroll down here. This is in reference to the property. I'll just read part of the letter that was submitted by the applicant. And we have some pictures that we're looking at. So attached to this email are pictures of what the Buzzies facade looks like currently. We plan to keep it the same, basically the same look, using a hardy material with a wood look or cedar wood. The one main difference will be happening on the side with the Buzzies sign. The door there has some windows above it that have been uncovered from the inside and they would like to restore. They're just like the small blue framed windows that are above the large windows and door on the sign that has the Country Cafe sign on it. So we'll be using the same door and windows that we used on the end of the building, and that's indicated in some of the pictures they provided. with the difference of it being only a single door rather than a double door. So that is that is the question before us, and looking to see how that fits in with what the historical overlay zone provisions are. This was given to us as a heads up last month when Mr. Wycliffe provided some insight that he wanted to discuss this project with Buzzy's Cafe. When we look at the facade, let me rotate my sideways for me, trying to rotate it.
You're gonna see all the members tilting their head sideways for the Word document view.
I got it rotated, but now all the text is sideways, but the pictures look good. All right, let's just open this up for members of the commission to comment on the project, the application, and share any thoughts or questions you have with respect to what's being proposed.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I hate to beat this dog to death, but again, the last line, I will do my best to find one, or I'll try to find somewhere to print something off. It just seems like this is kind of all, this project is like off the cuff to me all the time. Maybe I'm being hard, but it's just, I don't know.
You'd mentioned a standard that you kind of liked as a precedent moving forward with some of the renderings that were provided with the other project, which is very helpful. We have a picture of the subject property, which is nice that we can look at, but we don't have a rendering of what ultimately that could look like. And I agree with what you shared earlier, that's something that's a good best practice to help us make a informed decision on how well that complies with the vision of the historical overlay guidelines. So, long way of agreeing with you. Other comments?
It just seems like on one hand, we hold someone to the letter, and this is just kind of, to me, it just seems like, yeah, we'll try to make it look nice. I hope you guys all like it. I might be really being ornery about this, but this is kind of my opinion of every time we've talked to this particular gentleman about this, is just trust me, it's going to look really good. I promise. I don't really know what I'm going to do yet, but I promise it's going to look good. So yeah, I'm impressed, to be honest with you.
Other discussion points?
So nothing was submitted then on like the colors of stain or paint or anything that they would hope to have the new wood or hardy board. There's nothing been submitted on what those colors will actually be, other than wood look or cedar wood.
I'm guessing since he's not on, and we can't ask him for sure, but I'm guessing that's why he submitted picture number 2 of the old grocery store there, because that's what he's doing now. That looks sharp, but maybe that's his intent. Again, we're all assuming right now that
I
that's
think-
what he wants
I
to put
think
on
that-
Buzzy's in the Country Cafe. I don't know.
I think that picture, if I read this right, might just be showing what the doors and stuff will look like, I think. If I
Well, they're
read,
definitely not blue.
well, he was just referencing the blue ones to show what I think the windows, to describe what the windows they've uncovered would be. But I think the color and the look of the new windows and new doors will be like on the old grocery store in the other picture. But I don't read it as that's the colors they want to do on the building. if that makes sense. I think that's just showing what the windows and doors will look like.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I mean, I want to maybe outline what he's asking. And if we can't make sense of it or feel like it's too vague to help us make a decision, I think we can make that recommendation as well, that we continue this until we can get those questions answered directly from the applicant, or if we feel like we can disentangle this. But I'm trying to, you know, what's he asking? What's the ask? One is the facade on the outside, so that wood look, either the wood look or the cedar wood. So that's one thing. The second thing is it looks like they're going to restore the door. So that's 2. 3 would be the windows. And it's unclear what exactly they want to do with those windows. At least it's unclear to me. We'll be using the same door and windows. Okay, so that's the same as the old grocery store building. So we've got the wood facade or the wood look facade, the door, the windows, and the door and windows to be consistent with the version that he's already done in his other project at the end of the street, except it'll be a single door. And that's it. Those are the 3 things that feel like I can decipher from the email itself. And I don't, you know, if we're going to approve something, I want to be clear what it is that we're approving, not, you know, based on, you know, any assumptions. But all right, these 3 things. This is what we think he's asking for. Feels consistent. We can see a picture of it based on this. As long as that's what it is, we're either comfortable or we're not. So that's the windows and doors. The wood facade, if that's in line with you know, the color palette, you know, then we can make that determination as well. So that's my attempt to decipher the request. Your thoughts on that and how you want to move forward.
If I can ask one question, I was just looking at the emailed invitation to this meeting. Teresa, was Mr. Whitcliffe, were they invited to this meeting this evening, or were they aware of it or knew about it, or?
Yes, what had happened is,
Name is, okay.
yeah, so he was invited as per that email that sparked the response of his return email due to we didn't have a submittal. Hence, Weston, the city planner, was unable to do staffing notes as there was not a submittal till after his review had been done. I know that he has some concerns that were addressed in an email today, but was not added to your packet as it was just more of concerns that Weston had regarding the lack of information.
Well, I'd love to hear a verbal version of what might have gone into those staffing notes, Weston, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think this could potentially be a good project, but you don't really have a lot of information to go off of. You know, just taking cedar plank. Cedar has a lot of different stains. We're talking about a hardy board product that could potentially look like cedar. There's product that could look really good and feel really good in this historic downtown environment. And there's hardy board that might feel really kind of disappointing. And so without knowing what that is, without you guys having an opportunity to see that material, to see the color, is he restoring it to it sounds like he wants to restore it to a darker gray brown that's shown on the elevations now. But cedar also is a red and yellow and orange color wood. So is he planning on restoring that? Is the wood paneling, is it going to stay the direction is it going? Is it going to change to I think it's have to go through my images, but I think it's a vertical, or is it a horizontal? It's a horizontal now. Is it going to change vertical? I don't know why it would, but I think there's enough to discuss what material is being used exactly, how it's being applied. And as far as the window frames, it does look like he wants to restore them to that black frame, but a good clarification statement from him saying, this is an example of what we're planning to do to the windows, and they will be restored to this black metal frame. I think it's completely within your guys' realm to say, we're approving these specific things. And I do give pause and hesitation to giving any type of blank approval, because everybody's good intentions will not always pan out to be the best.
Yeah, thank you, Weston. And part of, I think, having a good working relationship with those that come before us to do projects is communication. And it feels like there's opportunity for miscommunication in this particular note and trying to interpret it. I personally, like you had mentioned, Wes, I personally would like more clarity of exactly what is going in. And I know it's a little bit more work to provide the product and the material and the color name and maybe a picture of it. But that's the whole point of this review, is to ensure that what goes in is consistent with the look and feel of what we want in a historical district. And it's hard to visualize that with the information we've been given so far. Thank you. Other thoughts on this, Jim?
Yeah, just looking at the Country Cafe, the historical picture on the right-hand side shows a double door. I mean, the current configuration has a single door. So yeah, I think there's a lot of questions we need to ask the developer. And I think the old grocery store looks nice, but that's a separate project, unless he's trying to let us assume that that's what he wants to bring down to this other, be it horizontal and or vertical. I don't know. I just think there's too many questions that when the time comes, I'd like to make a motion to table.
Well, you may get that opportunity. Other discussion on this? Any other thoughts?
Mr. Chair, I have one more thing to add. I mean, any of us that is making a decision on remodeling something or changing paint or changing windows, what do? We go to Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever we're getting our stuff from, and they supply you with beautiful brochures and what the textures look like and what the windows look like and how many panes. And I just don't think that is a big effort on the developer's part to come prepared with some material that all of us can make a really good decision, because this is a big deal on Commercial Street. We want it to be nice. And so far, I've made my position pretty clear. I think it's just kind of like haphazard so far. Is it going to turn out good? It may. Are we going to go, oh, that is not what we thought it was going to be? And I don't think anybody on this commission wants that. So
thank you. Other comments?
I just had one more question. Something was jogging my memory from a meeting quite a while ago. What is the proper way? Is tabling something like this the proper way? Or I thought there was something to do with tabling, that it couldn't be brought back the commission. What is the proper thing to do in this situation?
I think you're referring to, we've used the term continue.
Yes.
As well as table. So good question. Weston, can you give us some guidance on what's appropriate?
Yeah, you can table it to a date certain, so you can choose the next planning commission to discuss it. This isn't something that Teresa, I don't believe needs posting, but you can clarify me if I'm incorrect on that. So you could also table 2 and not a date certain. Either one would be fine.
Okay.
I'm hearing some faint background noise. I don't know if someone's trying to speak or if someone's just not on mute.
Sounds like Steve.
Sorry.
No worries.
I have another comment, Chair. Not necessarily for this or this project where we're at, but one thing to consider would be if you have a certain comfort level or know exactly what it is that we're after, it might not hurt to consider assigning that to Weston or saying, approved with these conditions, subject to the planner's review, so that you do have a comfort level that applicant, if it's narrowed down to maybe just a couple items. And that's another question for Steve, I guess, is what I'm asking is when you go through the approval process, because I know as a city manager, I get in that position quite often too, where the council says as long as they work with the city manager and the city manager approves X, Y, and Z. And again, I'm not suggesting that for an applicant that doesn't have even enough information to go off of, but process-wise, that might be something to keep in mind if that works. I'm not sure if that works in this situation, but that could be an approach too as we go through Commercial Street, or if we have somebody that knows that's the standard, or this is what the Planning Commission is after. And if it's a matter of saying, I just want to make sure I get the materials submitted to make sure it's a quality product, or that sort of thing, just saying pending, approval from the city planner or something along those lines might be an option.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it's a good option to consider, particularly when we have enough clarity to, partially grant some approval or let some action take place. From my standpoint in this particular one, there's the phrase "trust but verify" comes to mind. I trust the developer in the sense that his track record with his other projects have turned out, nice. At least it seems in the pictures and driving down Front Street. But this is unknown, and I am a little uncomfortable with a carte blanche kind of approach to this. Is there any part of that we can approve and it is clear? Again, the 3 things are a hardy material with a wood look or cedar wood. So that could be subject to, falling within the color palette, but then we don't have a chance to see it before the applicant moves forward. The second one are the windows and doors, and all we have to go on are the picture. But will it be the exact same or just something similar? We don't know. Jim, you had something.
Yeah, I think we also need to add on that the electrical and the signage. We talked about how if those signs were going to be refurbished to look era specific or as they were made, that'd be great, because as you can see right behind the Buzzy sign, there's a big piece of conduit to cut 4 floodlights. And I don't think that's the look we're looking for. I think it would be, I don't have a problem with the raising the windows. I think it's supposed to be behind the grill on Buzzies. I think that's one of the things they asked us to do or to consider, but again, there's just not enough. We're not even at the 90% solution, I guess, to move forward, in my opinion.
Any other opinions before we take some action?
Nate?
Yeah.
Just a couple thoughts that I had in general was when we had the discussion about the hotel, they brought some of this material discussion to the table. And, I like what, visually the dated cedar that needs to be stained versus the new cement board is visually appealing to me. it feels like there's some brick in their image that doesn't currently exist. I'm a fan of brick. Brick personally to me is like structural integrity type of situation. I love the idea of if there's hidden windows. I think there's limited natural light that comes into these buildings based on their proximity side by side. And so, you know, I think the current windows that are available, commercial grade windows, look really nice and clean and could allow a lot of natural light in there. And so I don't really know what I would say or do to address that as far as a standard goes, but I like what they're representing. I understand that they're not doing a good job of being clear and concise, but I like the look and feel on their kind of weak example. I like the idea of old wood being updated with current material. I like old windows being replaced with more expansive windows and more lighting and things like that. And so my thoughts are just more like, if there's something we can do as a group to kind of describe that front facade in any way, I would be in support of replacing materials that look deteriorated and things like that with current materials. I think I don't know how to further describe what I'm saying, but the spirit of what they're bringing to the table, I'm on board with that. But I agree with some of the comments like that Wes made. It's like, you know, give me a break. If you can't describe a little more accurately about what the front looks like, that may be a red flag for the rest of the project. And if we can help them to understand, hey, we like the hotel, we like the hardy board, we like the brick, we like the more windows. If there's something we can do to help them say, do this, we like it like that, we like your spirit, but you need to button it up a little tighter, I'd be on board with that.
Appreciate that. What else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
listen to everything. I think it's just maybe we need to recommend to the developer we just would like to see some samples. It doesn't have to be anything more than what we could go get ourselves if we're doing a project, and get some color brochures of windows, the brochures of what the siding's going to be, the colors are going to be, like Jim said, what lighting they're thinking about putting on there. I like whoever made the comment. I think it was Ty, that this kind of every developer's different, and maybe we need to spell out exactly when you come to the meeting, we want you to have a sample of the siding, a color sample, pictures of the windows, of your idea of the lighting, something like that, that might help move this thing along and clarify for the developer what we're thinking.
I was nodding my head, but for the record. All right. Other thoughts? And we've had some good discussion on this. I think there's you know, that lack of clarity. The question is there enough clarity to either move forward with some sort of partial conditional recommendation, or do we you know, potentially table this, or some option in between? So Jim, go ahead.
I would submit that either the picture has to speak for itself, or we need the developer so we can talk. We could probably talk, had they been here, we could have probably talked our way through this And we probably, most of us would have felt okay to maybe even grant approval or grant certain approval and contingent upon further review on some things. But as it is, the picture doesn't tell us enough, and we can't hear that verbal communication to differentiate what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, with that being said, is anyone prepared to make a recommended action based on this conversation and what the applicant's requesting?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we table this discussion until we get more information from the developer.
Mr. Woods, thank you. Is there a second for this motion? Jim, are you seconding or you want to add comment? All right, so Jim is seconding the motion. Any other discussion with respect to this motion? The only question I have is Weston used some phrases, time indeterminate or whatever you said, time indeterminate or time defined. Do we need to articulate that if we're tabling it? Can we just table it? Or do we need to say we're tabling this until the next meeting?
You can just table it, and if it's on the next meeting's agenda, that's fine. You don't have to say that it'll be on next meeting's agenda.
Okay. Good enough then. Any other discussion on this motion? Jim, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I think Wes said until we have more further clarification, either the pictures speak for themselves at the next meeting or the developer's there. I think that's kind of what I heard. Maybe I'm incorrect in his way he stated the motion, but it can be as early as next meeting. Is that correct?
That's how I understand it.
Correct.
All right. Well, a last call for discussion, and then we'll vote.
You know, Nate, I think also you'd want to have a staff report in your pocket before moving ahead. That'd make you feel better.
That would make me feel better. Agreed. Thank you. All right. So the motion on the table is to table this request until we have more information from the applicant to clarify some of these parts that we haven't been able to get the clarification either from the pictures or the fact that we don't have a live interaction with the developer. All in favor of tabling as outlined in the motion, please vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's unanimous, Teresa. And that takes us to the conclusion of our agenda. Thank you for participating in this unique format tonight with respect to a Zoom meeting versus a live meeting in person. Stay safe. Jim, you have one more thing?
I'd just like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, you have to exit out of the meeting. Right at the bottom right, it says leave meeting.